Welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and your New York Knicks win game one of the second round, 121 to 117 over the Indiana Pacers. It looked rocky for a bit, but they pulled through and made a big comeback. Jalen Brunson went crazy. Dante DiVincenzo hit a clutch three. Josh Hart had another enormous game. We're getting into all of it next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode, because we are here for you guys 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7 days a week lately, given how things are going for the Knicks. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And Gavin is off tonight. I think he's actually working Locked On NBA, so you could check him out there if you want. But I'm joined by Matthew Miranda from The Strickland to break down this Knicks game one win. Matt will be writing the recap probably right after this about this game for The Strickland tomorrow morning. So, Matt, I think first we may as well just hop right in. How you feeling after game one?
So I'm feeling two things predominantly. One is I was very, very uncomfortable as that game got down to the last few minutes, partly because I bought this new chair that was supposed to be this amazing, comfortable gaming chair. It's the best one I could possibly spend all this money investment. It is like sitting in a church pew, and my butt has literally now become like so sore that the whole game I can't even right now, like I can't sit comfortably without hurting it. So I was literally physically uncomfortable, and literally I don't know if it was the flashbacks or whatever, the last 5-6 minutes, you thought I would have been used to this by now from the Philly series. I was dying. Like, I was dying with everything. And then at the end, so we'll get to the end. The other thing that was striking all night, and I think that added to my like anxiety, was, I don't know if you're a fan of American Horror Story, but like every season it's the same character, it's the same cast, but like in a completely different world. And going from everything about the Philadelphia series and the way they play and the way they fit with the Knicks to what it was like watching them play Indiana tonight was, to me, like just as jarring. Like, I felt like I was watching almost a different sport at times. Everything about Indiana's approach is different. Everything about what Indiana, I think, can throw at you is different. Their approach on both sides of the ball is so different. The roles that different Knicks now find themselves at. This is all much easier to take after a win. I can say that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I felt much of the same, if we want to just start with broad strokes here. I said this, I did a quick hitter before this for Locked On Sports Today, our like sort of daily sports center-y type show. Just a quick little thing. And I was like, I think the Knicks looked like they found everything way easier on offense in this game than they did the entire Philly series. I mean, you saw it in how DiVincenzo was allowed to play by this team. You saw how Josh Hart was able to, not always get to the rim unimpeded, but, just kind of waltz his way in there, it felt like, compared to just the massive bodies he was running into against Philly. And, the fact that they were all getting hacked like every time that they did anything. And granted, like, I'm kind of over it with the whole refereeing thing in that series. And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to have some choice words, particularly if anyone from like, Indiana decides to come in on this podcast about like the officiating in this game. Like, there were some crap calls all around. It was a Zach Zarba officiated game, so I don't know what you're expecting. Like, he sucks. So he's like maybe the worst referee in the NBA as far as like crew chiefs go. So unsurprising that it was kind of a mess, but it was much less physical of a game, and the Knicks definitely had to sort of adjust to that as things went on. And credit to the TNT broadcast team, which, I wish we could still have the MSG broadcast team. Unfortunately, they're retired for the season at this point. But, they pointed out like the Pacers, they lead the league in pace, but it's not necessarily because they're sprinting in transition every single time. It's also just because they set up their offense and they try to get a playoff within about the first 6 or 7 seconds. And I think that really, really like shocked the Knicks a little bit, even though you can tell that, in film and whatever. I think they thought they would be able to influence the Pacers a little more than they were. And that led to the Pacers kind of getting to establish tempo. And especially in like the third quarter and early fourth quarter, really starts to look like they were pulling away from the Knicks a bit in this game before the Knicks kind of put the clamps on, finally found something that was working. As far as their coverages and stuff, we saw very early in this game, like OG Anunoby and Josh Hart like had a missed coverage early in the game. And, there was just like little things that kept popping up of like game plan things that just kind of get crystallized throughout the game. But, I think ultimately what we saw was that, the Knicks found just enough on defense to put these guys away. And then despite really not doing that well in the rebounding department by their standards, like only ending up out rebounding the Pacers by like, I think like 7 or 8 total in this game. It was, eight rebounds total that they out rebounded them in this game, which I don't think will hold. Only one more offensive rebound, which I don't think will be a thing that's going to happen normally. But we're able to find enough of a rhythm with those 3 Nova guys, and probably a good segue to start talking about Jalen Brunson, who gets 43 points in this game, 14 of 14 from the free throw line. Along with that, only 1 3-pointer made, but 14 of 26 from the field, 6 assists to go with that too. I mean, it was just another virtuoso performance from him. As the Knicks official PR Twitter noted, the first player in NBA history to have 4 straight games of 40 points and 5 assists in NBA playoff history in a row. Joined some very sparkly company as far as the just the 40-point game aspect with like, I think it was like Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, like all the
Jerry West and Bernard King and
LeBron James, I think as well. I think LeBron was on that list. Like just
list.
all the biggest names, so he really etched himself into the history book there. But what did you make of Jalen Brunson's performance in this game, where I think he was the main guy that right from the jump, I was like, oh, he's going to have it easier this series. I mean, it's kind of just going to be on the Knicks to stop this Pacer offense, but the Knicks offense for sure seems like it's going to come easier now.
I thought when you mentioned the free throws, one kind of canary in the coal mine indicating this really is going to be a different series for Brunson. He got to the line a lot against Philly, but I think the physicality manifested over time and him starting to miss some free throws. A lot of Knicks, I think, started missing free throws because of that. It was swish, swish, swish. There was a point in the game where I was struck by how much it felt like a regular season game, just because Indiana defensively is like, if Philly had, I don't know, I don't want to keep making comparisons. I was struck by that, and I thought Brunson, there was a moment with about, I think, 8 minutes left in the fourth. He was going to his right, and he got caught trying to make a jump pass, and the corner defender had stayed, so they got the interception. And the very next time the Knicks came down the court, you could see like he took them hard on one-on-one, and you could see in his mind the whole time like he had made this transition. He's like, all right, I know that they're going to stay on the shooter, so, and he just made this quick, determined move, got an easy shot, and I felt like that just feels to me like that's how the series is lining up. Like, obviously teams are going to make adjustments, but Indiana, like, how many people can they throw at him? Like, they had Nembhard and Nesmith not only weren't stopping him, and this goes back to some of the regular season as well. Like, he's fouling them left and right. Like, Nembhard fouled them, I think, twice on critically late. I think twice tonight on plays where the ball hadn't been inbounded yet. So obviously, like, that they're focused, but like, well, the focus you want. Philly talked in the first round about how important it was to beat the Knicks in rebounding. You can talk about it, but there's a reason it happens. Talk about Brunson all you want. There's a reason this happens. And I didn't see anything in the game that made me feel any differently than like, holy blank, this guy he's there right now. He's the difference. I thought he was the difference in that series. And, Siakam had a nice game, and Halliburton is a great player, but like, who won the pace? I don't want to jinx anything. Brunson is just like the whole answer right now. It's not that simple, but it is. Like,
yeah, you say the answer, and my brain can't help but to go to a app comparison you made a couple weeks ago about Brunson being very similar to like how Allen Iverson was back in the early 2000s, as far as what his role is on this team, how much he's relied on to score, how much he gets beat up every single game, and how he's always undersized and always having to like fight for his life, and yet still just manages to come out there and drop 40 on you. Except for, I would argue that even minus Julius Randle, he's got a much better supporting cast than any team that Allen Iverson ever had. And with the Sixers at least, and that's why we're seeing the Knicks able to pull these games out, because you still have a Josh Hart to get those big rebounds and push the pace and get those assists, and you still have a Dante DiVincenzo to make a big three late in the game, and buoy the comeback that you managed to pull off, and do all these great things. And I think that's probably a good segue to kind of set the table for what we're going to talk about in just a second. But we'll talk about in just a second, the next segment, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, the supporting cast, get into OG Anunoby some. I thought this was statistically not a game that will like fly off the page at you, but one that as you were watching it, especially late in this game, to me at least, popped big time, as far as like, this is why you have this guy. This is why you traded for him. So there was a lot of other really good performances for the Knicks in this game other than just Brunson, and we're going to get to those in just a moment. But first, I got to remind you all that this episode and this next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. Obviously, if we're talking about just the sports of it all, the Knicks have been, with all of these close finishes, quite damaging to mental health for some, I'm sure. Though I find myself a little more zen in these situations, and I try to roll with the punches, especially because I have to come and talk about them every day. But talking about them every day, that's a little more stressful for me, doing all these podcasts every week, and coming on here and having to talk about these games and come up with fresh things to say every single day can get to you a little bit. And rather than talking about it in an ad read, it could perhaps be a little more beneficial for me to talk about it with a mental health professional, even if it is a overall not exactly the most world-ending problem in the world. It is still something that keeps me up at night, and we should all do everything we can to take away the things that keep us up at night. So if you want to, therapy can be different for everyone, but most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, and we're back in to keep talking through this big game for the Knicks. And Miranda, I'm going to give you the choice here. We've got two guys that we could potentially highlight here. We have another 48-minute performance for Josh Hart, who ends up going for 24 points, 13 boards, 8 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Shoots 9 of 13. I think he opened 5 for 5, or maybe he went 6 for 6 to start this game. Goes 1-1 from 3, so continues even on a small sample size to keep shooting the lights out from 3. And just in general, I think made a huge impact on this game in terms of playing like a big and getting big rebounds over these guys, and pushing the pace especially. I mean, it's miraculous to me that he played that many minutes and still was able to push the pace that much. And then you also have Dante DiVincenzo, who, after a very, very up and down series in the last series, seemed way less perturbed in this game, way less covered, was, not only able to get open along the perimeter, but able to put it on the floor from time to time and drive inside. Found his lanes, winds up with 25 points, Shoots 10 of 17 overall, 5 of 9 from three. Hits a big three late to get the Knicks close in this one. As they were mounting their comeback, and they desperately need it. I think it was the one that tied the game, if I'm not mistaken. It kind of all is blurring together for me already, and we're only an hour since the game's been over. But your choice. Which one do you think do you want to open with? And how are you feeling about these two other Nova guys that once again were relied upon so much in this game?
I think one thing that was striking with both of them in the game tonight was how different the whole landscape was for them with Joel Embiid not there. Hart plays like a bigger player against anybody, but Hart, against this Pacer team tonight, he's I don't know what to say about Josh Hart. There's no translation for him. He's a player who clearly he's that guy. The bigger the spot, the bigger the guy. Like, you see them on other teams sometimes. It's a hard confluence. You have to get the guy on your team when you're playing the games that matter. They did ever since he's been here. This is what he's done. And tonight, there was a point where I was like, my God, Hart's played like every minute. Like, you have to get him out. And then he does something, and you're like, he goes coast to coast. Looks like he's going to break his ankle landing after making the layup, and he just bounces up and runs back. And he's doing everything. He's astonishing. I don't have my thoughts yet for Josh Hart, man. He's astonishing. What I like as a contrast or a kind of a juxtaposition of the two is that Hart has just been this metronome of consistency throughout the playoffs. Like, every game he is bringing this, every minute he is bringing this. DiVincenzo's been much more like a heart attack. But when DiVincenzo has been presented with the big moments, he's popping every time. And that's a really nice, it's nice to know, what, that guy's not, the volcano's quiet right now, but we know it's going to burst when it has to. And it's also nice to know, with everything else we're trying to deal with injuries and rotation stuff, you have one guy, every game he's playing 48 minutes. He's giving us 15 to 20 points. He's giving us 15 to 20 rebounds. He's giving us 6 to 10 assists. He's defending. He's pushing and getting easy baskets that we need that pay off, come late when everything's crunched down. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, and all three of them really, but especially Hart and DiVincenzo, who are so often, I mean, we saw in this game, I think that the way to get Jalen Brunson a little bit of rest was to rely on those two to, kind of keep things afloat for what did Brunson end up getting? 5 minutes off in this game? 4.5 minutes he gets off in this game, because he played 43-33. So,
like a preseason game at this point.
Right. And it was Deuce McBride really didn't have a great game in this one. He actually, I expect him to be much better every other game in this series, because he's another guy that's been extremely consistent throughout these playoffs. And I have all faith in him to, to come back and make some shots and, potentially do better. But didn't help that he had to play so many minutes against TJ McConnell, who is just the ultimate pest. But, that when you have DiVincenzo and Hart out there and a defense that isn't going to put as much ball pressure on them and as much pressure right around the 3-point line, you're going to run into situations where Devo could take a couple slightly longer threes then where he's just coming around a screen. He felt, like I said, comfortable enough to go in for a floater once or twice in this game. And, those are big things. Those are the little things where it's I go back to what you said a second ago about, things feeling a little more like a regular season game, where it just it felt like the defensive intensity for Indiana wasn't quite there, against the Knicks in this game. And of all teams, I think the Knicks, you have to really, ratchet that up, because they're the one team that, because of how good they are on defense and how physical they are on defense, you don't want to make them feel comfortable on the other end and feel like they can just walk all over you, which I think the Knicks largely did in this game, minus the offensive rebounding, which I feel pretty confident is going to come back with more power next game. But yeah, DiVincenzo too, he comes through when you need him to, much like you said with Josh Hart. I did look at it. I was like, man, how did I mix up which shot was which? But obviously that was the one that put them up, the shot from DiVincenzo. which like totally got mixed up with a different shot from someone else in my mind. There were many big shots in this game, but just huge moment from him. And like Hart, when you need just a little extra something, getting it on one end and taking it coast to coast. And he did that multiple times in this game where he just took it the full length of the floor to go finish a layup. It's incredible stuff from those two. And they continue to be exactly the supporting cast that Jalen Brunson needs. And, as we've seen throughout their careers, dating all the way back to college, they've kind of always been the guys that Jalen Brunson needs, to play championship level basketball around him. And, they're just doing more of that now. I'm super happy to see DiVincenzo hopefully kind of figuring things out. And I think this matchup is going to be much better for him throughout the whole series than Philly was. So hopefully that continues. But we haven't talked yet about OG Anunoby. We haven't talked about Isaiah Hartenstein, who I think things were a little rough at times, but ultimately came through with a pretty decent game and had
a big 3-pointer.
I was about to say had the 3-pointer of the season, arguably one of them.
That was big.
Which really saved things at the half from about 50 feet away. So we got a bunch to talk about, including, some things we saw like Precious Achua minutes and all kinds of interesting stuff that we still have to talk about here. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I got to remind you all that today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. And it's never too late to show mom your love this Mother's Day with DoorDash. It's coming up quick. I know it's right after my birthday, actually. My mom never lets me forget. So surprise mom with flowers, gadgets, and self-care essentials all in one place, delivered right to her door. And does mom have a sweet tooth? Is she a tech enthusiast, a beauty connoisseur, or is she outdoorsy? No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and more. And you can get thoughtful gifts she deserves with the convenience you need. Choose same-day delivery or schedule a week ahead for when flowers and gifts should arrive to her door with DoorDash. So keep in mind, we're less than a week away. So don't schedule a week ahead at this point. But, 6 days, something like that. Or 5 days, maybe by the time you're listening to this. So order now and get everything you need for Mother's Day on DoorDash. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order. Now on DoorDash. That's promo code LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. All right, and we're back in to continue talking through this game. And Miranda, a huge sequence to me in this game came from OG Anunoby, who tied for the team lead in plus minus in this game, which I think was pretty telling. I think this was a really good game for him and a really good matchup. I think that we saw him sort of try to solve Siakam throughout this game, and the Knicks were sort of trying to decide how to cover him and stuff like that throughout this whole thing. But I think that OG finally kind of figured that out towards the end. And I say that because one of the biggest sequences of the game to me, OG gets a steal along the baseline, tiptoes it along the sideline, I should say, tiptoes along the sideline, takes it all the way in, gets a bucket on one end, immediately gets back on defense, gets behind Pascal Siakam, gets between him and the hoop, and Siakam tries to just, as he had a few times during the game, just put his shoulder down, get right in, and go get a bucket, answer right back. And OG just stonewalls him, hands up, no foul, does great. Maybe if it was Joel Embiid, it would have been called a foul, but we're beyond that time now. And now it's back to just being good defense. And Siakam just kind of clangs it off the side, doesn't even quite hit the rim really. It just kind of like clangs right off. And then the Knicks get it and, get a transition opportunity out of it. I watched that. I was just like, this is why you give OG that money. Like, that's two vastly different defensive plays. One where he had to have the tact and the precision and the wherewithal to get that steal, then to tiptoe the sideline, have the grace to do that, and then the speed and the burst and everything to get all the way to the hoop on the other end, and then to come all the way back on the other end and play a completely different style of 1v1 man-up defense against the biggest, baddest dude on the other team, and the only one of their two stars that really depending on if you consider it like more of a big three situation. But if you consider Siakam and Halliburton to be their two main stars, like Halliburton didn't really show up in this game, but Siakam sure did. And he had himself a really good game and at times was really cooking. Took that assignment and just stonewalls him. And it was at that moment, at least for me, and maybe you feel different about this, but at that particular moment in time, I was thinking to myself, like, I think the Knicks are going to win this game now. Like that was a huge moment to me that OG manufactured pretty much entirely by himself. And I just found myself thinking afterwards, like, this is why you're probably going to pay this guy upwards of $35 to $40 million a season this coming off season if he asked for it, because he's just worth it. Like, he's a championship level player that makes championship level plays.
Yeah, and it's in addition to everything else you mentioned, just having the intelligence to know like when to go for it. He had a big steal of Halliburton also late when he cut in from the corner and got a steal on him. And a lot of guys might know when to do it, but they can't pull it off. And some guys won't try it, especially in the big spot, because you don't want to foul. You don't want to gamble wrong. But when OG goes for it, he's got this Ed Reed quality where, like, if he's in on the ball, like, he's getting the ball. And is really, I don't like to get too far ahead because I just I'm enjoying, how the season's going, but it's impossible not to let the imagination run a bit with what potentially you could do long term with a player like this and what it means for like roster flexibility going forward in the kind of approach you want to take, because you've seen now in multiple in two series against completely different kinds of difficult rosters, he factors in against everybody. He factored it against Embiid. He factored it against Maxey. He factored in playing off of them so he could, dive in and be like a predator. And he's factoring in already, like you said, against Halliburton, maybe primarily against Siakam. If Mathurin was there, he would be dealing with Mathurin. Like, there's just, as much as Brunson is a skeleton key, like offensively, what OG is on the other end is probably roughly equivalent.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I just think I think that's totally correct. I mean, and I think that at times, and I mean, OG had his big moments, obviously, but I think that at times in the Philly series, he felt less significant on defense, and maybe we sort of forgot a little bit, or some people did, about just how impactful he could be when he has a perfect matchup across from him. And most teams in the NBA have invested in some form of a big wing that they, play through and run part of their offense through. And on a lot of teams, that's their best scorer, and a lot of like pretty much every other team that the Knicks could face other than Philly in these playoffs has a guy like that. Like, if the Knicks manage to make it to the next round, they're probably facing like Jason Tatum or Jalen Brown. And, you're going to run into a situation where you need someone to go up against those guys. And that's OG Anunoby. And then going up against Siakam in this series, you're running into some of the same stuff where it's like someone needs to be able to go up and one-on-one him. And, you maybe would trust that to Randall if he were healthy, but I think that OG is the guy. And like, he just didn't really have that matchup against the Sixers because they're two guys that they employed at the forward spots are just like Tobias Harris was basically checked out already. And, Kelly Oubre is fearsome sometimes, but most of the time it's just kind of there, like he'll miss a bunch of threes and occasionally he'll make one, occasionally he'll get a big dunk or something, but he's not a hugely consistent player that you need to like shut down all the time. And I think that's why we saw it was a little hard to find exactly where to deploy OG in the last series. And now we're just seeing like, you could throw him on the best player on the other team, and also he's not going to like let that dominate everything that he does on defense. He's still going to have the heads up plays. He's still going to, be smart about switches and be smart about help and, get to his spots as much as possible. And we saw tons of that in this game. I think another guy,
a lot of the offensive end too, like significant since the playoffs have started. It's needed to happen against Philadelphia. They just needed someone else who could try to create a shot. And he was very successful in the mid-range, and tonight he hit a lot of threes in this game. I think he hit
3 of 7.
Okay, yeah. Like, every time you don't think about him, maybe it's stealing a breakaway, or it's an impressive stop, or it's a big three. Not loud, but like always like you're saying, like he's fits that perfect. He really has just been. To me, he's a bases clearing double. Like he's not the home run, but like he just when he's done, you're like, yeah, like that's right.
Yep. Yeah, and another guy that did a lot of that in this game, although he again took his lumps a little bit too. I think that there's going to be some debate over how the Knicks played Miles Turner. I was telling you before we started recording, like I I wasn't too worried about it, if I'm being completely honest. Like I think that he's sort of the guy that's like the more streaky shooter on the Pacers, the more streaky scorer that also is generally a negative in the rebounding department, at least for a guy his size. I mean, got 2 rebounds in this game. I don't think they're going to run into a situation where like Hartenstein and Mitch are only going to combine for what 8 rebounds again in this series. I think that I would be surprised if they got less than 12 to 16 rebounds between the two of them every given game beyond this. I think it was just kind of a weird anomaly where a lot of bounces were going kind of weird and they were turnovers and just things that mitigated, steals and, things like that made it so there just wasn't as many rebounding opportunities. But I thought Isaiah Hartenstein, all in all, had a pretty solid game, 13 points again. And I guess this is a good time to point out, like, all but 3 points of the Knicks scoring came from the starters, which is crazy. So the bench needs to hopefully score a little more next game. And that mostly comes down to Deuce McBride and Mitchell Robinson. Precious Achiuwa got a few minutes as well. But I thought the Hartenstein did a pretty good job of, I think the Knicks, once they realized that the Pacers were going to sell out on Brunson, did a good job of using Hartenstein cutting, behind the coverage in the pick and roll and, getting a couple easy buckets that way to sort of reset things and give Brunson a little more room to move, which is a big credit to Brunson too for making those passes. But Hartenstein, adjusted well on offense, made some good passes for 4 assists, which it was pretty crazy. Like the Knicks as a team had a pretty solid amount of assists in this game and weren't that far off the Pacers, which is not normal. And then on top of it, hit this crazy buzzer beating 3 at half, which took it from a 9-point game to a 6-point game, which was enormous for the Knicks going into the second half. I think that really helped things out. And Hartenstein just made it look really cool, hitting a 50-footer from half court. But I guess before we close out, because I'm sure there'll be more time to talk about Deuce and Mitch and what they didn't bring to the table. But what did you think of what Hartenstein did bring to the table in this game?
I think Mike Breen was probably the happiest person in the building just because someone tried to shoot a heave and then Hartenstein's teams made it. I thought, we've seen now he did it. It happened a little bit in the Philly series. There have been points in this playoff run where, the Knicks hit a rough spot and for a little bit, the little Hartenstein Brunson 2-man floater game, like that just carries them. Like it just like methadone. It just gets them across, like just gets you through. And there's been a couple times where like that's happened, and his playoffs have been, I think, a reflection of what his regular season has been. He's always giving you positives. Like if he's not scoring that game, he's rebounding, or he's getting a bunch of assists, or he's bringing the physicality. I thought tonight it was key that he had a lot of foul trouble kind of early, and had a point where like he thought he had his 4th, and like thankfully he didn't. I think Mitch was kind of, either banged up, limping around a little. I thought it was big to have Hartenstein out there tonight as much as he could play, because I thought he was really like the best big that they had going. You mentioned about the bench. The bench does need to score more, but I think also the bench needs perhaps more opportunity. Indiana's bench played 72 minutes tonight. The Knicks played 27. Like, it worked, and I keep feeling all postseason. Like I keep. This is my concern with the long game with them. Like my concern on postseason is Tibbs. You have to stretch it. Obviously, you can't keep pushing it. And every game they win, and they keep winning, and they keep winning this way. So I can't complain. And who was I gonna? Did I want DiVincenzo to lose 10 minutes tonight just so Deuce could play more? I'm gonna say no. But I do wonder, like, how long can they keep doing this with a 7-man rotation? I guess the answer is you keep doing it until someone stops you. But like, I don't know if this is. I don't want to say anything after game one.
Yeah.
I wonder if the bench will get more time, and if they do, I wonder if that's a bad sign, because if the starters can keep going, I think if Deuce had shot better, he probably would have played more. Brunson seemed to get a nice rest when he needed it. I think I'll give Thibodeau also credit for that. He's not resting people a lot, but I feel like he's been intelligent about when he's rested Brunson in particular. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think Achua should have played more? I thought Achua could have played more tonight than he did, but did you miss him when he wasn't in there?
No, certainly not. I mean, I'm kind of with you in that. I had the same thought where I don't know at what point it was. I think it was after one of the Hart buckets, and I just had this intrusive thought of just like, man, if this comes back to bite him and he gets hurt or something, like the season's over. Like that's it. Then you're done. Like if he gets like a strained hamstring that keeps him out for like 4 games or something,
Yeah.
you're pretty much toast at that point because you're relying on him so hard. So yeah, I don't know. I do wonder. There's this feeling of like the other shoe getting ready to drop or something, and it does just feel ominous. Even if you're like, you know what, they're world class athletes. They know what they're capable of. Josh Hart is clearly in amazing shape, even though he consists on candy and junk
That guy's
food.
pissing Mike and Ike's at this time of the year, man.
Yeah, just Mike and Ike's so much that he's got a sponsorship from them and everything else. I mean, I don't know. It's tough to like argue against it. And yeah, I think that the the medical staff knows what they're doing. Tibbs seems to know what he's doing. The players know their limits and would probably ask out if they felt like they needed it. But yeah, it's getting to a point where it just feels you're almost on pins and needles the whole game. And like with each sub, you're like, okay, just give him like another like 30 seconds. Like, come on. Hopefully Deuce is the guy that's able to break through and at least give some guys some rest going forward. But maybe it wouldn't be the worst if you could find a way to get Hart a couple minutes, any given game and get Precious in there. Especially when like the Pacers, surprisingly for how fast they play, are actually a pretty traditional team as far as, like their roles, and the guys they put out there. They have 2 traditional centers. They have 2 relatively traditional power forwards. Like it's actually somewhat Knicksy the way that they do it. And I think if like Obi Toppin's out there, you can throw Precious Achiuwa out there and, he'll hold his own and it shouldn't be a big deal. So I guess we'll see how that all goes. But for now, lest we potentially end up going more bummery a little bit here off of a big win, let's wrap this one up. But Matt, do you want to real quick remind everybody where they can find you on like social media and all your work at the Strickland and anything else you want to share real quick before we go?
Yeah, I'll have the recap coming out tomorrow at the Strickland. You can find a lot of my work there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's I think it's Matthew E. Miranda. Yes. I also host the Jacobin Sports Show, JACOBIN. I had Caitlin Cooper on before the series. If you want a really good primer on all things Indiana Pacers, and Rick Carlisle is not on your speed dial, Caitlin Cooper is the next best person that you could talk to. So check that out as well.
Cool. All right. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back for a preview of Game 2, as well as, of course, Game 2 recap, Game 3 recap, maybe some other fun stuff in between. But until then, thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.